Okay, so I wanted to do a little sketch here just with pencil and paper to show you the idea of using boxes for figures and also for animals. So I'm going to start with my red pencil here. I'm using a picture from Line of Action, and I'm going to start the same way I normally would start. Kind of placement and gesture. Kind of looking at this photo, where is the weight sort of evenly distributed in the hips, but there is, I think, a bit more on this hip, because you can see the hips are tilting. Okay, and looking for relationships of hips and the whole body, but not being too precious, because I know I just want to get that movement down, the life of the pose. The big thing is drawing what she's doing, not what she looks like. That's what Philpoo always says, and something that you just have to constantly, or at least I have to constantly remind myself, I'm not just copying, I'm kind of interpreting and expressing. Like, her head is actually a little bit more up, and she's got maybe a long neck, rolling down the neck into the thorax vertebrae, or the thoracic vertebrae, or the rib cage vertebrae, and roll. All that weight is transferred into that lumbar, and then down into the trochanters, or the hips over here, and that weight is, and that's the whole pelvis, and then that weight is shifting into the legs, and those legs, this back straight leg is holding quite a bit of weight, and you're rolling into the calf and down. Not so worried about proportion yet. Check knee to knee, what's that angle? And I'm going to put the buttocks in here just to help me figure out where this leg is, but I still want to make sure, most of all in the gesture, that I'm getting that weight down, transferring over, yep, and down, just using the side of my pencil to kind of be a bit more broad. And I'm going to revisit all of this, just check it out. Does that feel right? That's what I'm worried about. Does it feel right? Does that weight feel right up here? That pelvis? I think the spine, there's something off, so I got to check it out. Feeling up, stretching. That arm is stretching. And rolling down into her arms, into that book. Rolling up, stretching the neck into the head, and making sure that, again, it all feels sort of right. Not that it looks right, that's sort of, I'll try to make it look right as I go, but I know it will look right if it feels right, if that makes any sense. Okay, might start to build this up a bit. Just revisiting everything, building it up. Okay. Okay, there's a quick little gesture. Nothing spectacular or fancy, but it's something there. I'm going to grab my kneadable eraser and roll it out. And I just want to lighten this up a bit to give me sort of more room to do my next drawing over top of it, my next stage. Okay. Maybe just so everybody can see it, I'll use blue. Hopefully you can see that it's still light, non-photo blue, but we'll see how it looks. Alrighty, so I'm going to look for some anatomical details here. Not really, it's not that I'm trying to be super anatomical. Yeah, that shows up a little bit. But I want to just make sure that my proportions are right And a good way to do that is through the major masses, the rib cage, head, and pelvis. So I'm going to start by getting in there and feeling out the spine. This is a great pose for the spine. And I'm going to start by just finding those masses. So looking for any little indication of where the rib cage might start. As you get more experience, you'll sort of start to be able to feel it, know where it should be. And the rib cage is 1.5 heads high. So coming up that rib cage, feeling it at the top of the neck. That 7th vertebrae is basically the start of the rib cage. So you can always see the 7th vertebrae, except for this pose, the hair of this woman is covering it. Okay, now thinking of the neck maybe as a cylinder. Okay, shoulders, I'm just gonna check the alignment. And I mean, so this is sort of like an exercise. It helps you see better, it helps you understand things better. Doesn't mean you stop once you master it, because the boxes are like a tool. You can always use them, and I pulled them out to use them on all kinds of poses. But in the buttocks, for example, this is where it's going to be really useful. So obviously, you know, our pelvis is not really a box, but the concept of a box really helps. And this goes back a long time before Bridgman did it, but Bridgman was probably one of the best at doing it, and he made it beautiful, which making figurative boxes beautiful is not easy, but he was able to do that. So, okay, in terms of a pelvis, we have the sacrum here, sacral triangle. Oops. And our pelvis is round, but the reason we want to use this box is so we have our sacrum on the back side, and then the ischiums, the pieces we sit on, are down here, and that's where a lot of the muscles attach. But they're on the bottom of that pelvis, and without a box, without an idea or a concept of a box, it's really hard to visualize that because it's such a complex object. But with the box, it's not so bad. So in terms of the buttocks here, you want to look for the line of the buttocks is basically the two big muscles on the buttocks here. They come over and they grab the leg, they grab the trochanter over here. But what's important is you can kind of, having a corner here, like how I'll draw the box a little more clearly. Having a corner there tells you where you're transitioning from one line to another. So up here we're on the back, and then it transitions to the bottom of that box, which will also be great for shading later. And then that muscle comes over and it actually grabs the side over here. So side, back, bottom. So that's one example. Now let's do the rib cage. So we want to get our tilt right, and then we want to look for some sort of a corner right in here, finding that corner. And I'm not just drawing boxes, you know, like I'm not just placing boxes, I'm using my gesture, and I've also already drawn some sort of a rounded form, whether sometimes that's an oval, a sphere, or a cylinder. And so I'm looking for corners, and her arm is covering it, so it is a little bit difficult, but you can use whatever you've got. I'm not a mathematician by any means, but I know that a lot of times in math you use the information you have to solve for the information you don't have. That's exactly like this. We don't have all the information about our ribcage, but what we do have, we can kind of use to figure out where we think it is. Okay, so there's a ribcage box. And the main thing is just looking at these tilts here to help you find that. All right, now let's do the head. This is actually a place where the head is going to be tricky because we're almost seeing her face in profile. So again, I'm going to start with something simpler and rounder. You know, just for the sake of making this demonstration clear, I might change the angle of the head just a little bit. So she's still sort of doing the same thing, but I might just try to show more than one side here. So just changing it a little bit. So we see the side and front of her face, and we see maybe a little underneath the chin. Because this is, her face is more or less in profile, so we're not going to see as much depth there. So I'm changing, we can't see the top of her head anymore. I'm saying we can see under it. I'll just shade that in. So again, the reason this is so important is that now we have like the zygomatic bone, the cheekbone, it is on both the side and the front of the face. And having a box helps us tell where that transition happens. So I'm kind of changing this up a bit, moving her nose, her mouth. The other thing that even just like me changing something or moving something, I mean, the body is so complicated. The only way you could do that is if you have a simple thing in mind. So if I'm moving a box, you know, that's a whole lot simpler than trying to move a person's head. So, okay, there's my change to her head. Now I'm going to work down to the legs instead of the arms, because I think those are more important because they're holding the weight. And I'm drawing right through, trying to feel where I think things should be. And again, I'll probably do a round form first. So feeling where her leg would be with a cylinder. And I'm looking for that offset of the calf, right? Coming down the back. It's not straight, the calf isn't right below the upper leg. It's back, it's behind it. It's below and behind. You gotta look for that offset. And a lot of times, you know, you don't really need a box on a calf, but like somewhere like this foot, it's gonna be really useful to use a box idea, a box kind of concept. So I'll just keep it really simple by saying that like the heel bone right here, the calcaneus, is going this way, and then it's also going away from us. But instead of doing just a box, I'll draw a box just to show you what I mean. So here's our box for the foot. I did sort of a wedge. So I'm still implying that there's that this part right here, that corner, right? But I'm saying it is a little more foot shaped. But we can still do a box in there. I'm just gonna find the other leg to make sure I'm always drawing things kind of together, not drawing one thing then the other, because the legs are in relationship to each other all the time. And sometimes I find it's easier to just draw the leg, you know, as you see it as a natural thing. Sort of just find it and then clarify it. So clarify with that box. I'm going to use the triangle wedge here again. Okay, so for this leg and the other one, let's see. A lot of times I'll do a wrapping line, like an ellipse. So I'm coming down, and then in this pose, you have a shadow right here, a core shadow. That's where boxes come really handy. And then it turns that corner. And so that concept of the box comes into play. It's coming around, it's turning the corner. Like this. I'm not really shading according to the light. I'm just trying to show you the changes in planes. So I'll just shade this a little darker. So that would be our leg. And it tells us a bunch of things. The box helps clarify the direction and the planes, because you're making it really obvious, right? It's going this way, right? It's going like this. This is the direction. It's going like that down there. And that box, it clarifies that direction. Okay. So there's that part. Now let's switch over here. This one's sort of more important to me because it's holding weight. Again, I'm going to start with maybe an ellipse to just help me find that corner. What I mean by that is I'm coming around, and then I'm just saying if my pencil was touching her leg, at what point does it turn and go to the back like that? So I'm just feeling the form and then looking for sort of where I think that corner plane is. And now in the lower leg, like the joint, the end, the condyles of the femur, they get pretty boxy. So there we go. Now this one here, sure, I'll shade it sort of according to the actual light and shadow a little bit more. But again, I'm really just shading in this case. This is a great exercise for doing boxes, really help with shading, but I'm just shading in this case to help just make the boxes look clearer. Okay. So we got the major masses down and the upper leg, now lower leg, okay. Again, I kind of always revisit it. Feel, form. Yeah. I wish they made these colored leads in thicker leads, like in a number 9 or something. Okay. So here we go. And I leave space between my joints, like my legs. And I always think of something Charles Eames said, the furniture designer. He said when two materials connect, I'm paraphrasing, I don't really remember what he said, but basically, like in design, you really have to be careful where two materials intersect, or where things connect. That's where things can really go wrong. And I mean, people have constant problems with their leg joints. I mean, in real life, you need knee replacements, all those things. And it's just because there's so many muscles connecting in there, and joints, and it's a complicated area. So I'm not trying to say you should leave the hard parts out, but if you just leave space in there, it can be much simpler to draw the boxes. So just something to think about. Okay, in the lower leg, looking for a cylinder first. And I'm gonna ignore the contours that I drew because I'm trying to just simplify here. I'm doing my ellipses. And I mean, this coarse shadow running down really does help because that can be a place to jump off from. I'm just not sure that it's correct in this case. Yeah, I think I'm going to move it a little bit. So I'm going to say that the front of my box is here and the side is here. So in this case, I'm not totally using the coarse shadow. Okay, now this foot is a really good example of that. So again, the concept of a box, using the footprint of the foot. And you could build up your box like that. This is just quick and dirty, but thinking about that wedge shape, we have the leg, and then it comes into the toes. So just a simple concept for this sort of exercise. Keep breaking that pencil. Okay, like that. So that's what I'm thinking about here, the footprint, and that it's almost like her toes are lifting a bit. So I'm putting a little bit of a cut there to show that her toes are not on the same plane as the rest of her foot. And again, I'm just letting it breathe. I'm leaving that space in there. And I'm going to ignore the light and shadow in this case. And then using a box as a floor, placing your figure. You can even shade it in if you want. Okay, to finish off, we'll do the arms. Now I'm going to look at the scapulas, shoulder blades. Scapulas are sort of like a triangle, but they do have a top to them. So even something like this sort of shape, you know, if you think about that as a little slice of a box, right? It's a really complicated, I remember like learning the scapula, like what is going on with that thing? But so let's say you have a box, right? Well, on the back side of that box, there's a triangle. And then there's a little sliver on the top. And then now you sort of have a place, that's a, you know, it's just a rough copy of a scapula. But that box really helps that make sense. So just keep in mind, some of that is on the top, like here, I'll draw this one. We have some on the top and then some on the back. Okay, and then what is going on with this arm? It's tucking back and obscuring our box. And I'm completely ignoring my gesture here. My gesture is off. So that's what I mean. Don't just blindly follow. I would say, like, don't assume you're right ever with your drawing. Always keep double checking. When you're trying to draw accurately. If you're just trying to sort of feel the drawing and go for it, then sure, don't double check. Be confident. But if you're trying to be as accurate as possible, never really assume you've got it. You got to keep checking. All right, so we can see the top of her shoulder. So that helps me understand where which side I'm going to see. But I don't have this right. I can tell it's on a bit more of a tilt out. And this is coming out a bit more, going away from us and then coming back towards us. I'm going to draw over with black in a sec. I'm going to, again, not go too far with one arm before I come and jump over, find that other arm. All right, I'm going to draw over with black for this one to make it clear. So we're seeing into the top a little bit. And in this case, I'm pretty much going to use that coarse shadow running down there. Maybe not exactly. This one's hard. The arm, it's like we're not really seeing much, but I'm gonna say we're seeing the top. And a lot of times, like when you're drawing people, but also a lot of things, you have to make choices about what you're gonna say. And even just on a minute level of like which direction is the form, you don't necessarily have to be correct, but you got to make a choice and say, this is the direction I'm going to go with. And maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but it's better than being vague. You don't want to leave something unresolved. So I'm just going to restate all these things, make them as clear as possible. I don't love where that arm is in terms of the pose, because it kind of throws off our box. Kind of throws off seeing that corner. It was sort of better, easier to see without that arm. All right, this one, something like this. I'm just gonna pretty much ignore the hand for this exercise today. Now this back arm, we are really just seeing most of the top, and I'm going to add a little bit of the underside. I'm going to shade some of these things in that don't really make sense, but I'm just doing it to make it clear what we're seeing. Okay, right there you have it. That's sort of a box exercise with the person. I know that took a long time, but that's sort of the idea. And you can do this much faster than I did. I just was trying to take my time and explain what I'm doing, so it ends up taking me a long time. All right, thanks very much. I hope that helps, and I'll see you guys in class.